Hello everybody, Gbenga Olatunji here. Thank you and you are welcome for joining us on the concluding part of the different approaches to corporate governance, the role-based and the principle-based approach. So we are rounding up now. Please, if you are yet to subscribe, go and subscribe. Click the notification button, the subscription button, like us, comment. Let us build the community together and give opportunity to those as much as possible that we could be reach and we could reach through you. So that's why you need to subscribe and you will be receiving notification when you do so from us anytime we release new videos and new tutorial. So let's go into the business of the day straight away.
Both following issues and many more, like the board, the role of the board, and the like, the structure, the composition of the board, function of the executive, function of chairman, the board meeting, and the requirement of the board committee, audit committee, and the like, performance evaluation of the board, remuneration governance, risk management, internal audit, whistleblowing, external audit, relationship between the board and the shareholder and stakeholders, business conduct and business ethics, sustainability, like we treated it in ethics, transparency, and many more. Even though we have adopted IFRS now, but still, we cannot really say it has really gained real ground. We are talking of reality, not paperwork. So we talked about ICGN. There's another international body, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They are a bit known too. OECD. They too govern and speak about corporate governance across the world. And last but not the least of them is corporate governance in the Commonwealth, that is Commonwealth nation. Let us look at OECD. OECD, yes. Principles of published by this organization, OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They intend this. Don't forget ICGN. They focus on investors, more on investors and the like. To assist governments of countries to improve legal framework, regulatory framework, institutional framework. Two, or also to provide guidance for stock exchange. Don't forget, there's no how we will talk about corporate governance that will not talk about stock exchange. Because corporate governance is meant, not that it's because of big organization, but it's because it's only big organization that have capacity to build such a system. So there's no how we will not talk about stock exchange when we are talking about good corporate governance. So OECD currently has 30 members, and you can imagine US, Australia, Japan, UK, and the like. But Nigeria are members. So these are national members in OECD. But for ICGN, they are institutional investors and the like. And in exam, like I'm pointing our attention to, these are some of the things they can say we should say difference between OECD and ICGN. And what do they stand for? How do they approach corporate governance? What do they represent? So back to ICGN. Objectives of, I'm on page 8. Objectives of ICGN principle. It is a voluntary association of major institutional investors, companies, financial intermediaries, and other organizations. So the membership of ICGN is basically investors, while OECD is country membership. ICGN principles are consistent with OECD. Don't forget that they are all about investors' protection, but have more specific objective, that is ICGN, of providing information to stock markets and companies around the world about the issues that investor will take into account in deciding how or where to invest. The ICGN gives greater emphasis than the OECD to the right of investors to participate actively in corporate governance in the company in which the investor has chosen to invest. So, context of their principle. So it's actually 6 steps. Principle number 1 for OECD: ensuring the basis for an effective corporate governance framework. So they want legal backing for investors' protection. Please don't forget. Effective corporate governance requires a sound legal, regulatory, and institutional framework that market participants can rely on when they establish their private contractual relations. Principle number 2. So the first one is they want legal framework. That is not that we just enjoy it. We want all this framework to be legalized across nations. 2. The right and equitable treatment of shareholders and key owners function. So they want justice for investors. They want processes, legal proceedings to be not that okay, if they've done wrong for investors, we will be able. We want it legalized, document. They want processes, standard processes for investors, equitable treatment. The third one, institutional investors, stock markets, and other intermediaries. OECD wants institutions to be established, not about private individuals in the market and the like. Well, corporate bodies to come together to see investors functioning effectively in stock markets and the like. The role of stakeholder in corporate governance too is key to them. So now this one is a bit embroadened. As they are looking at the investors, they are looking at the impact of investment on the stakeholders too. The corporate governance framework should recognize the rights of stakeholders that are established by law for mutual agreements. So, and I think when we started, we've actually treated who stakeholders are. So let's move on because of our time. Principle 5, disclosure and transparency. We are trying to do that in Nigeria, but it's still artificial. So they want full disclosure. So they support IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, and they want it implemented in reality, not by paperwork. Last but not the least, the responsibility of the board to be expressly stated. The board members should know what they are there to do and should do it correctly and should be monitored and supervised. ICGN, who monitor the board? Yeah, that's why they are clamoring for regulations. Like if we have the board of director of an organization and that company is listed in stock exchange. So the stock exchange should supervise That's why we have some of those legislations and they are clamoring for more. Content of ICGN principles. They want the objective of organization to remain in focus. And you see that that one is strategic. Objective of organization is usually stated by the owners at the strategic level. We call it corporate strategy. So they want organization to pursue their objectives strictly. They clamor for shareholders' rights. You see, the other one, as they are clamoring for shareholders' rights, they are equally saying that stakeholders are important. The board of directors, too, organization should have well-formed governing body and should be monitored and regulated. Corporate citizenship, unlike in Nigeria, we do not have corporate citizenship. Organizations see themselves as isolated pieces of the environment. But ICGN is clamoring that corporate citizenship should exist in which there will be social contracts. That's what they are talking about. That is, organizations see themselves as part of the community and do what is right and just, whether to the investor or to the stakeholders. Limitation. So, basic generic limitation of corporate governance statements or principle based across nations of the world. There's no uniformity because they are speaking, but they are not speaking loud enough. Like we are recently saying in Nigeria, Sorosoke and SARS. That is, they are not speaking well enough until the whole world is speaking the same language like that of IFRS. Almost all nations of the world, there are still some yet to sign it, but almost all nations of the world are signed into IFRS implementation. So until corporate governance 2 becomes something like that, is then that we can say, okay, we've broken limitation. International statement of principle about corporate governance establish minimum acceptable standard of corporate governance, but they have several limitations. Because they apply to all countries, they can only state general principles. They cannot give detailed guidelines and so are not specific. Since they are not specific, they are possible they are possibly of limited practical value. So until the whole world come together to enforce like we endorsed IFRS, when we endorse generally together corporate governance, then the whole business world all over the world will move forward. Their main objective is to raise standard of corporate governance in worst countries like in Nigeria, to raise awareness. Unlike national laws and code of corporate governance, there is no regulatory authority like in Nigeria. Even we accountants do not know that FRC should or is currently the agency for code of corporate governance in Nigeria, because they are not active in that part. So with this, we come to the end of how we can approach corporate governance. We can approach corporate governance based on two approaches. It's either based on principle, and whether principle based or rule based, there are advantages and there are disadvantages. Okay, let me allow you to ask me questions because I think we've treated like 7 to 8 topics generally.
I hope you've enjoyed the lectures. Please don't forget to click the subscription button and join us as we look at the board of the direct.